All right, we're going to try this here. This is Aaron from I Believe in Fairies. I'm trying a video for the first time. Not the first time, I guess, but I'm trying to do this, use these videos to make some solo content, I suppose. So I'm trying to I'm working on this bestiary project. I've been really fascinated with bestiaries, and I got this book called The Grand Medieval Bestiary, and I got it for Christmas this last year, and it is an amazing book. The images are so weird but beautiful, and I think one of the authors says sumptuous. And they're stunningly gorgeous, and I really love when authors like Tolkien and Lewis, Lafferty, when they use animal imagery and they're pulling it from what you'd find in medieval bestiaries or bestiaries or whatever. So I'm starting this bestiary project. It's going to be connected to I Might Believe in Fairies. It'll be a behind the scene, or what do you call it? Like a behind a paywall. So but it'll be kind of a. I did all this research, so I'll do all this research for different animals, and I'm going in alphabetical order. I created this gigantic list of animals, like there's over 100. And what I'm going to do is I do all this research, and I have the Grand Medieval Bestiary here. I have a couple other bestiaries. There's the Physiologus, which is a very famous one in the Middle Ages. There's St. Isidore's Etymologies. There's Pliny's Natural History, and there's a bunch of other resources. Those are kind of the main ones, but I'm going to pull those all together for each animal and create a sort of, I don't even know, create a sort of symbolic framework, I guess, a symbolic overview for each animal. So I'll take, for example, the first video will be ants and antlions, and that will be for everyone to get a taste of what I'm doing. And I'm going to start off with a story, either from Aesop's Fables, Ovid, or whatever, and then I'll talk about what the different bestiaries have to say about these animals. I might put my own opinions and interpretations in there as well, and try to make connections. So, like, for example, with antlions, antlions are these in the biological world. Antlions are the larvae of the predatory larvae of what are called antlions, adult antlions, which are insects, winged big insects that are, I think, no, they're not aquatic, but they're very different from one another. They're holometabolous insects, and so they undergo a complete metamorphosis. So much like ants themselves, and bees and wasps, and butterflies, beetles, antlions are holometabolists, so they have this complete metamorphosis. So the antlion is this little predator that kind of lives at the bottom of a funnel-shaped pit, and it's the immature or the larval form of an adult antlion, and they'll prey on ants. So an ant will come close to the edge of the pit that the antlion lives at the bottom of, and the ant will slide down there, and then the antlion will kick up sand and try to like dig this ant out so the ant falls all the way down, and then it eats them. And so there are two different there's two different kind of interpretations of the antlion. The Eastern tradition has this idea of these are gigantic predatory ants that guard Ethiopian gold, which is pretty cool. They kind of look like dogs almost. And then so that's in the east. In the west, it's closer to Saint Albert the Great is one of the first people to describe what an antlion looks like and their biology and all that stuff. So my goal in this project is not to debunk anything. I'm not looking to debunk anything. I'm not looking to say, well, these medievals or in these the ancient peoples were so stupid. Look how they believed, in this weird stuff. that's not my intention at all. My intention is to understand their symbolic framework, their what they believed about these creatures and how they made sense of these animals. And I'm not looking to, like I said, I'm not looking to debunk them. And so I actually have some notes. And I'll, if I can figure this out, I will include images in this video too. But so the reason I'm doing this, it's partly I'm inspired by, I partly completely inspired by my friend Richard Rowland and Jonathan Pajot, whom I don't know personally, but their exploration of, especially Pajot, their exploration of symbolism has been very helpful to me in kind of making sense of the scientific world. So I've always known that faith and science are reconcilable, that there's no real opposition there, unless you have a misunderstanding of both. But when I was working as an actual scientist in a lab and everything, I had a hard time with a framework, with a framework of like how to really look at bees, ants, wasps, insects, whatever, through the lens of Christianity, right? So how, like, other than just kind of pious platitudes about, they're all God's creatures, look how amazing they are, they're so beautiful. Yeah, that's all true. But like how, unlike because in like Lewis's discarded image, he describes the medievals having this vast understanding of the cosmos as like a cathedral, right? And everything had its place. Everything was it's like the tabernacle that houses the Eucharist, right? So how do you and I hadn't read that at that point, but it's sort of like that. So what do these animals mean? How did the Christians in the Middle Ages interpret these animals? How do they take these traditions from ancient pagans and kind of reinterpret them or make sense of them in a Christian framework? And so that's kind of what I'm doing here. So I have these notes here. I don't know if I'll go off them very much, but from the Grand Medieval Bestiary. And again, I'm not just pulling from them, but I'm going to read this quote. And let's see, where does it start? So, we are greatly indebted to the men who spent so much time creating these artifacts, men who prepared the sheets of parchment, who, beginning in the 14th century, took equal care crafting fine, solid paper whose very texture was beautiful, who with infinite patience copied the lines of script and prepared the successive gatherings that make up these manuscripts, who executed the elements of painted decorations, frames, initials, and compositions, from the most modest inventions to ambitious full-page paintings, who ground and applied the colors and the gold backgrounds that, after many centuries, retained their original radiance, who conserved and passed on these books with passion and respect, who made these objects with a piety alert to the power of images, but also effectively transformed many of them into sumptuous gifts, destined to improve the lives of those in religious orders, to give pleasure to princes, and later to members of the middle class. These men knew full well that they were producing treasures, and indeed it was the treasuries that much of their handiwork would be preserved. We are all heir to the care taken by these men. And it goes on, but these bestiaries, and throughout the series, I'm gonna try to do videos and share images with them. They're just stunning. They're gorgeous, and they're so imaginative, and there's just something to them that is so purposeful. Everything has a place. Even the marginalia, all the weird stuff on the margins of the manuscripts are just so weird and cool. And they all have there's a it's like they're doodling, right? They're doodling on the margins. And they have all these weird doodles, but like they're doodling based on their imagination and their like understanding of the cosmos. So it's like so imagine like looking at the doodles of someone who has a fundamentally different cosmic vision than we do as moderns. It's wild, because you'll see hares like rabbits, murderous rabbits, like attacking people, or like riding like humanoid looking snails, and like there's a reason for that. There's like it's just a doodle on the margin, but like the reason it's like all of those animals and they're behaving in a certain way, there's a reason for that. Because that's how that's how they understood the role those animals play. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the symbolism of animals just in general. So I'm pulling all these notes from the Grand Medieval Bestiary. So symbolism of animals. So animals, both I don't want to say real, but biological and fantastical. Maybe we'll make a distinction between biological animals and fantastical creatures. So like the Sphinx or the phoenix, the centaur, the siren, right? And then you have the bear and the lion and the tiger and the I almost said unicorn. That'd be fantastical. The antelope, the bee, just animals we are accustomed to. So animals serve as boundary markers. So when you reach the edge of a map, there's going to be, as Jonathan Pajot says, there's all this breakdown at the edge, right? So the center has all the order, and once you reach the edge, you have all this breakdown, and that's where you find monsters. And monsters are they are like a composite creature. They're things that don't fit together, right? And they mark the boundaries. They usually hide treasure or other forbidden things, so dragons or sphinxes, right? Animals can be creatures of wonder. So they could be biological animals like elephants in Ethiopia, where the medieval Christians, to them, these were gigantic monsters, right? And they were just in awe of these creatures that they had never seen. And some images, I think elephants are drawn without ears sometimes because they didn't know what they looked like, right? So they'd only heard descriptions of them, and which is kind of silly to us because elephants have gigantic ears. And then they also serve as models for allegory, to model either behavior to emulate or behaviors to avoid for a Christian. And then animals hold up a mirror to humanity. So let's take the ape, which will be another one of my videos coming out. The ape is kind of a grotesque parody to the medievals, a grotesque parody of humanity, where it's almost human looking, right? But things aren't right. Obviously we can tell the difference between an ape and a human, but they hold up a mirror to humanity. And they're also, it can be used to, in fables, to kind of critique humanity while also be entertaining, and maybe even critique like the clergy or the nobility, while not being super offensive, right? Maybe it was, but there's an element of humor to it, and you're distanced enough from it where you're not offended, but you can still reflect on yourself based on the antics of these animal fables. And then that's a concept called the theater of the world. So again, critiques can be made of people, and no offense was given because the animals would distance the audience. The animal characters would distance the audience from the critique while still admitting to themselves that they too have the same faults. So that's from the Grand Medieval Bestiary. And then they're also symbols of authority and order. So when authority is recognized, the animals are in harmony with the rest of the created order. So for example, the ass and the ox adoring Jesus in the manger. And I have a video on the ass that's going to be coming out. And I'll cover that a bit in there, and maybe you can see why. Well, actually, I don't know. I made this video. I'm making this video after I wrote the script for the other one, so I don't know. I don't know if I connected it to authority, but there's something there. And then when humans cast this order aside, the hierarchies become muddled and confused, and there's chaos, right? So Nebuchadnezzar, he becomes a beast, right? Because he doesn't respect the proper hierarchy. And so I'm going to read this quote from Michael Curley's translation of the Physiologus, and he's quoting Origen. So this is Origen. The Apostle Paul teaches us that the invisible things of God may be known through the visible. and things which are not seen may be contemplated by reason of in likeness to things which are seen. He shows by this that this visible world may teach about the invisible, and that earth may contain certain patterns of things heavenly, so that we may rise from lower to higher things. And out of those we see on earth, perceive and know those which are in the heavens. As a certain likeness of these, the Creator has given a likeness of creatures which are on earth, by which the differences more easily might be gathered and perceived. And perhaps just as God made man in his own image and likeness, so too did he make the remaining creatures after certain other heavenly images as a likeness. And perhaps every single thing on earth is something of an image and likeness in heavenly things, to such a degree that even a grain of mustard, which is the smallest of all seeds, may have something of the image and likeness of heaven. So what I understand that what he's saying is perhaps just as God made man in his own image and likeness, so also did he make the remaining creatures after certain other heavenly images as a likeness. So the earthly material realm is modeled after the spiritual. And so man is made in the image and likeness of God. But I think St. John Paul II says that every part of creation has a spark of the divine, or like mirrors some aspect of God that that we can learn from. So we can learn about heavenly things by studying earthly things. And that to me is wonderful. Because there's something kind of superfluous about studying insects to some degree. I mean, there's always like agriculture, pest control, things that we actually need. But then there's like stuff like dung beetles and dragonflies, where you don't really need to study these things, right? There's not really a pressing, urgent, pragmatic need, but they're really amazing creatures. And dung beetles navigating by the Milky Way, and like scarab beetles being images of divinity in Egyptian mythology, right? So it's like there's something to these things, right? There's something that's worth studying about these things, even if they don't yield some immediate pragmatic benefit. So the Middle Ages was marked by this confrontation of Christianity with the ancient world, where the Christianity, once they kind of like converted, and you're not super worried about people reverting to paganism, they could just start taking these stories and taking these like symbolic understandings and reinterpreting them and trying to figure out how they fit, right? How they fit with Christianity. And so you see that a lot in like the griffin and the phoenix and the unicorn, where they had maybe a certain meaning in pagan cultures, and then Christianity reinterpreted them, or maybe completed the interpretation of them, maybe like completed the understanding of them to be images of Christ in some way, right? So all three of those animals are images of Christ: the unicorn, the phoenix, and the griffin. They also could be images of the devil, right, or of evil. So symbols are polysemic, so they depend on the context. There's multiple meanings, and it depends on the context which you're interpreting it. So the Grand Medieval Bestiary gives an example of the dog. So the dog is marked by fidelity and loyalty, as noted by Pliny, and that also there's also understandings of the dog as a representing sexuality. So there's medieval images of women like entrusting her puppy to a man. So it's kind of like an invitation for sexuality and all that stuff. And then they're also associated with beggars and thieves. So treachery and theft. There's more negative connotations in like scripture, where it's in Proverbs, a dog that returneth to its vomit. And then in Psalm 21, for many dogs have encompassed me. The counsel of the wicked hath besieged me. They pierced my hands and my feet. And they were used as slurs against Jews too. So there's like dogs are a great example. Another one is the lion. I guess one more positive piece of religious symbolism The Dominicans were called the dogs of the Lord, the Dominicanes. I don't speak Latin, so there's a lot of Latin like in my quotes and stuff, and I'm just skipping it because I can't. I don't want to even try to pronounce it. So like, Dominicans are the dogs of the Lord, and dogs are associated with their order, and it's a positive connotation. So it's not just like dogs are all good or all bad. They have, they're polysemic, so they have multiple. It all depends on the context they're used in. The lion is another good one. So in Revelation 5:5, and one of the ancients said to me, "Weep not, behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, hath prevailed to open the book and to loose the 7 seals thereof." So the Lion of the tribe of Judah is Christ, right? And obviously there's the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which is Aslan, and he's a Christ figure. But then there's, 1 Peter 5, "Be sober and watch, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, goeth about seeking whom he may devour." So lions are also polysemic. Basically, every animal, if to simplify it, every animal can either be an interpretation for the devil, or an interpretation, or like you can interpret it as a Christ figure. Even serpents have this interpretation. Like serpents in Western Christianity were very aware of this. Obviously, the serpent connected with the fall and the devil, but also serpents they also have an element of Christ to them as well. And other creatures like flies might have the most negative as much as I've seen. There really isn't like a good positive for flies, but maybe there is. I just haven't come across it. But flies are probably the most negative. But so Alcuin says the lion could either be Christ or the devil, depending on the context. I won't, as we're going through these, I'm not going to like get into details of like different images. I might try to include them in the presentations and stuff and the stories, but I'm not an expert. But I will say there's a quote from the Grand Medieval Bestiary that says, "The identification of medieval images is not a frivolous game. It must be based on discipline and method." And that, man, I wish I put page numbers in my notes so I could find the full quotes more easily, but oh well. So when you look at these images, the big thing to keep in mind is that there's a logic to it. There's a logic to it that we may not be aware of when we're looking at these medieval manuscript images, and iconography too. Iconography, there's all sorts of logical, or like certain figures have certain attributes, so you can identify those figures as those figures, right? So like Christ has certain attributes that should always be there in an icon, or most of the time. St. John the Baptist, Our Lady, right? And there's the same thing with like with animals in manuscripts, that there are some telltale signs. So sometimes it's really hard to tell. Like birds are hard in medieval manuscripts, because a lot of the time, if it's not a domesticated bird, it's going to be harder to tell apart than like a more tropical bird, one they may not be as familiar with, right? And then the meaning of the image cannot be divorced from stylistic analysis. So how the image is stylized, how it is crafted, informs the meaning of it. And again, I'm not going to go into details because I'm not an expert, but it's very important, because you might have a gold background that means something. There's one image in here that has it's all just peacock feathers, right? And then there's an image overlaid on realistic looking peacock feathers, which has a meaning as well. That's kind of the plan. And where are we at with recording this here? That's the plan. I also have, oh man, this is getting be a big file. It's already at like 2 gigs. I also have, I'm going to start. So my old podcast episodes are all on Substack, as far as I can tell. But then when I started here on Substack, I don't even know, like 2 years ago now, man. It brought in all the old ones, but not any of the new ones since then. So I'm going to try to get those onto Substack in the next few weeks. I have a baby coming as well. So in like early May. So It'll be baby number 5. So it shouldn't affect things too much. I should be able to find some time to do this. But yeah, it'll affect things, but hopefully not too much. So with the medieval stuff, with the medieval bestiary stuff, I'm going to have the first episode out, or for anybody to listen to. I'll try to put these on YouTube as well, and then some of my episodes from I Might Believe in Fairies. Where'd my water go? I don't know where it went. Oh, there it is. And then yeah, I'm gonna try to get these out. I have the scripts for 4 of them written, and I'm gonna try to keep working on those. They're really fun to write, honestly, because research is fairly easy. I already have everything pulled together. I just need to kind of put it all in one document and then just make a script out of it. Tie it all together, try to make sense out of the data. And yeah, that's my plan is. There's a lot more to talk about with the Grand Medieval Bestiary. The first 5 chapters are really, really interesting. They kind of do an overview of, what these manuscripts are. Animals and their place in medieval culture. So I can go through a little bit more of that. It's only been like 25 minutes. So animals as faithful companions. Very few cultures use animals in their imagery as often as the medievals. The medievals had essential roles for agriculture and animal husbandry, so animals were around them all the time. Now I know that's true for a lot of other cultures too, but medievals really included animals in a lot of their images, and they're everywhere. They're everywhere in their images, and they also So, for example, faithful companions, dogs, right, used for hunting. So Gaston Phoebus, he was an accomplished hunter, and he wrote descriptions of animal behavior. And he used hunting texts to use animals like dogs as allegories for good government and politics. Man, my throat's really tickly. I guess I don't usually talk this much during podcasts. So good dogs deserve a good leader, one who is valiant, bold, and never sleeps. And then he says, regarding sheep shearing as just taxation, once a year it's good to shear one's sheep in the proper season without stripping away the skin too often. This is done carelessly, and wool will not grow on flesh that lacks skin. So don't overtax your people, basically, because you'll injure them, and they won't produce wool for you. They won't produce the goods you need to function as a society. Animals were in exotic menageries of kings. So the popularities of different animals changed over time. So lions were always consistently popular. And then other animals rose and fell in popularity. So bears, boars, leopards, things like that. Crocodiles. And yeah, so they rose and fell in popularity depending on the time period and the politics. There's a really interesting book called The Bestiary of Love by Richard de Fordeval, and he uses it's a bestiary, but he uses animals to for his arguments in favor of love, courtship, and he's writing them. He's writing to a woman that he loves. It's my understanding. He's writing to a woman he loves. He's using all these animal imagery. So it'll feature a little bit in some of my episodes, but they're pretty. He doesn't use necessarily the traditional lore associated with bestiaries. He kind of puts his own spin on things, and then it's really fun too because the lady responds. There's the other section of the book where the lady responds and goes through all the animals too. Yeah, it's a very weird, very funny sort of book. So the lion who attacks a man is a symbol of love. For just as a lion consuming his prey will attack a man who gets too close to watch, so love, quote, runs toward a man only when he looks at it. That's from Bestiary of Love. The idea of the orchard, so this is moving on to the orchard, is a secret enclosed garden for secret amorous encounters, populated by peaceful animals and guarded by fearsome predators. And that's sort of an image of the garden. The image of the Garden of Eden It's guarded by the angel with the flaming sword. And well, actually, depending on which church father you're reading, animals weren't in the Garden of Eden. That's kind of something we've read into the text. Um, the Garden of Eden was where Adam and Eve walked with God, and then the animals were all outside of that, which is really interesting. But rabbits are symbols of sexual desire. So when people say breeding like rabbits, it makes sense, right? So a lot of the symbols come from just observing their behavior, and then it's pretty obvious, like a lion. The male lion's mane is very splendid and regal looking. It looks like a crown, right? So they're fearsome predators. Or the rabbit, it has a lot of babies, like it's a high fecundity, right? So it makes sense. It's all these things make sense. Some of the interpretations are based on misunderstandings of biology, but they come to really interesting conclusions based on those. So I don't even, like I said, I'm not going to debunk things. So some of this stuff is really out there. So like, and they have animal funerals. So there's this court case called, or it was about the sow of Falais. So I actually have the page number for that, so I'm going to read that. So basically, like, they have funerals for animals. They also have trials for animals, and yeah, it gets pretty wild. So the animal, let's see. About 60 such cases have been documented in France from the 13th century to the 16th centuries, the most famous of which, held in Normandy in 1386, led to the conviction of the, quote, sow of Falais for infanticide. The animal was dressed in human clothing, ritually dragged from the town hall to the scaffold, and before the assembled crowd and a multitude of pigs was mangled and hung. The episode was later commemorated by a fresco in the local church of the Holy Trinity. So... the cow allegedly, sow allegedly killed a child, a baby, and they put the sow on trial and hung her, which is in front of a multitude of pigs, which is very, very dark and very kind of funny. So, yeah, and then... animals were viewed as obviously part of creation and images of God in their own ways, and that's compared to Neoplatonism, which was skeptical of physical creation. So I know a lot of church fathers were kind of Neoplatonists, but and I'm not an expert on any of this stuff. It's just something I'm constantly learning. So forgive me if I get this wrong, but Plato, he viewed the material world as he wasn't a Gnostic, but it wasn't it didn't matter as much, right? Whereas for us, and I'm just butchering that, aren't I? That's just not any good at all. But for Christians, the material world will be redeemed, right? The heaven and earth will be a new heaven and a new earth, and we'll have glorified bodies that don't decay or age or get sick or anything like that. So for us, the material world is how we worship. It's how we encounter God, for the most part. So in everyday sort of stuff. Yeah, and I don't know, this is kind of fun. I'll keep going. So, and then it gets into Adam and Eve, and Noah's Ark. So obviously there's lots of animals in Adam and Eve, naming the animals, and then Noah's Ark, saving the animals. Really interesting artistic depictions of Noah's Ark. The Rilans Beatus. So that's an image in the Grand Medieval Bestiary that the ark is like a cross section, and they have, so all of the animals are arranged sort of symbolically. So there are monsters at the bottom, right? And the bottom represents hell. There are birds at the top, and birds are much closer to the heavens because they can fly, right? And they're often beautiful, and their bones are even lighter, right? So that enables them to fly. And so they are closer to the angels. And then they are, so there's a depiction of Noah retrieving the olive branch from the dove. And then in that same image, the raven or the crow. That one, so there's two animals in every box. There's little cells. There's two animals in every one, and the crow is missing its companion because that was sent out first, and didn't come back. And so, and then there are lions symbolizing Christ of various biblical figures killing lions. Jacob blessing his sons with animal names, like Adam naming the animals. Biblical figures with animal heads and images. So, and then you have things like St. Christopher and the dog-headed people. So, in the Grand Medieval Bestiary, they talk about how animals, the relationship with animals changed after the coming of Christ for the world. So, prior to Christ, animals were depicted as dangerous and malicious in imagery. So David is depicted as fighting and killing lions and bears. So there's images of him specifically ripping open the mouth of the lion. And that prefigures Christ ripping open death's mouth or the hell mouth. In other medieval images, you might see the giant mouth full of, the souls of the damned, full of all these like little naked bodies. And that's called a hell mouth. And so Christ, burst from the hell mouth. And then so after Christ, the virgin and child are often depicted crushing them. So and that's a quote from Psalm 90. Thou shalt walk upon the asp and the basilisk, and thou shalt trample underfoot the lion and the dragon. By defeating them, Christ tamed them. So, for example, the ox and the ass at the Nativity from the Gospel of Pseudo-Matthew. So it's actually not in the canonical Gospels. So the unclean animals become clean and can be eaten. So there's that famous scene where St. Peter is having the dream, and God shows him all these animals, and he says to eat, right? And he doesn't want to because the animals are all ritually unclean. And then God commands him to eat them anyway, because what he has made clean, we cannot say they're unclean or whatever. However the quote goes, I don't have it written down. And then there's lots of animals as like saint companions. So St. Jerome and his lion. St. Anthony of the desert meets a centaur and a satyr. And obviously St. Francis of Assisi. There's St. Blaise. There's a bunch of different saints that have animal companions, or that animals work for them in some capacity. There's a lot of beekeeping saints. Beekeeping saints are a big thing, especially in like Eastern Europe. So yeah, that's and the lamb versus the lion. So the lion is an image of Christ, but it's the lamb that St. John the Baptist says, "Behold, the Lamb of God." So Christ is identified with the lamb more than the lion. So, man, there's a lot more to talk about. I think what we'll end with, it's really, really interesting. So, I don't know. So there's this, in chapter 4, it talks about geography. It's called the Geography of the Cosmos, Observation and Myth. So it starts off by talking about the 4 elements, so earth, fire, water, and air. And different animals have been associated with those elements. So they talk about the lion as fire, centaur is the earth, the eagle is the air, and griffin is water. And the symbolic associations often change depending on who you're reading and what time period you're in. But they're associated with animals. And then there's the Phenomena by Aratus, which is about the zodiac signs. And I think, oh man, he was in the Hellenistic era, so I don't think he was Christian. I don't think. So I'll read this quote from the Phenomena. Phenomena. Beneath the head of Hellas are the twins, Gemini. Beneath her waist is the crab, Cancer. Beneath her hind feet, the lion, Leo, brightly shines. There is the sun's hottest summer path. Then the fields are seen bereft of corn ears, when first the sun comes together with the lion. Then the roaring Etesian winds fall swooping on the vasty deep, and voyaging is no longer seasonable for oars. Then let broad-beamed ships be my choice, and let steersmen hold the helm into the wind. So it's about the zodiac signs, and obviously, as you may know, zodiac signs are all associated with, most of them, with animals. And then there's this really interesting image called the Zodiac Man, and it's got this. It's called this type of image is called melothesia. So it's a standing nude man with 12 signs of the zodiac. They're associated with different parts of his body, and then corresponding to the cosmos, because man is made in the image and likeness of God. Man is a microcosm of the cosmos as well, and so these images were more rare, but I'll try to find one and throw it up with the video. So superimposing, here, I'll just read page 72. I actually have the notes for this one. So yeah, they're very striking. So each body part is associated with a part of the zodiac. So where is it now? Oh man. Superimposing the circle of the zodiac on the human body revealed that the head of the man resides in Aries, sign of the ram, the neck in Taurus, the bull, the shoulders in Gemini, the twins, the heart in Cancer, the crab, the breast and stomach in Leo, the lion, the belly in Virgo, the virgin, the lower back and vertebrae in Libra, the scales, the sexual organs in Scorpio, the scorpion, the thighs in Sagittarius, the centaur archer, the knees in Capricorn, the sea goat, the calves in Aquarius, the water carrier, and the feet in Pisces, the two fishes. It was indeed exceptional to represent zodiac and the zodiac man conjointly, as in the composition from the Tres Riches Hures. I'm not pronouncing that right, but so yeah, so all of these body parts are associated with the zodiac, and don't ask me why. But the zodiac, so it takes the form of the mandorla, which is like this sort of egg shape kind of framing around the image, and it's whose outermost ring is divided into 12 signs of 30 degrees each, whose inner ring shows the days of the 12 months, the full spaces which represent 2 days each, being complemented by a final half space in case of months with 31 days. Inscriptions in the four corners spell out the triagonal aspects of the zodiac in accordance with a system of triplicities defined by Ptolemy in the 2nd century that retained its currency throughout the Middle Ages. So this strain of zodiac lore entails the use of fundamental qualitative categories, for example, hot and cold, dry and humid, masculine and feminine, the four corporeal humors, and the 4 points of the compass, and often also the 4 elements or winds, to group the signs in accordance with various systems. One such system is described in the corner inscriptions in this image, proceeding left to right at top and then left to right at bottom. Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, they're hot and dry, caloric, masculine, Eastern. Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn, they're cold and dry, melancholic, feminine, Western. Gemini, Aquarius, Libra, they are warm and humid, masculine, sanguinic, and Southern. Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces, they are cold and humid, phlegmatic, feminine, and Northern. I don't know what all that means. I have like vague understanding. I mean, I know what like phlegmatic and all that, the 4 sort of psychological personality types that we all kind of have parts of. So the mandorla, so placing the man at the center of the cosmos, and the proper function of the body was related to the signs and courses of the planets. So when in a state of equilibrium, man departs from the ordinary world and participates in ordered celestial functioning. So man is a microcosm of the world. So it is related to, so the mandorlas are usually seen around Christ in his majesty. That's usually where you'll find them. It is related to that, but it's not directly connected. So medievals, they use the zodiac as signs for when to plant, take medicine, etc. So we look at that now as like, oh, that's like the occult, right? So they didn't look at it that way. Like the horoscopes are what they're not really. It's not really astrology. Horoscopes are they're superstitious because they're so specific and vague at the same time, where it just doesn't mean anything. It's like, oh, today you'll have if you're a Gemini, you'll have a you're gonna have a secret encounter today or something stupid. Like it just doesn't. It's so vague and it can apply to any situation, and people get so hung up on horoscopes, Um, but these were like, um, so Theodoret of Seir, and I'm quoting the Grand Medieval Bestiary here. So has a quote: "Holy Scripture calls them signs, for they tell us when we should sow and plant, the opportune moment to take medicine, to cut wood for the construction of ships and houses. So, for example, when the moon is in Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces, it is a good time to bleed phlegmatics." So these, the courses of the planets were connected to the humors. So I pretty sure I'm melancholic caloric, and so is my son, and we don't get along all the time because of that, because we butt heads a lot. My wife is caloric sanguine. So if you don't know what these words mean, you can look this stuff up. But basically, and then it'd be connected to these planets. And so there's a logic behind it, right? So we do this still too. It's like certain times of year when things get warmer, then hey, it's time to plant. Certain degree days, you get to sort of rack up a number of degree days, then hey, now it's time to, now the pest insects are going to come out, so let's apply a pesticide. So like we just the same thing, it's watching for signs and then knowing that this is now the opportune time to do these things. And they were natural signs. There's nothing really super magical about them. They just had different signs to look for. It's very interesting, and it connects mankind to the cosmos in a way that is more holistic and more symbolically satisfying, if not maybe scientifically satisfying, than what we do now, which is to say we don't really have a connection to the cosmos. We're just specks in a gigantic universe that doesn't care about us, right? So like you'd see how having an ordered universe where things make sense and things that have a purpose is appealing to medievals, and it's appealing to us too. But we like I said at the beginning, moderns have a tendency to look back at this stuff and go, wow, that's weird. I don't get that. Like you read through like St. Hildegard of Bingen's Physica about her recommendations and remedies for various things, and some of it I'm sure does work. I think they found that some of this stuff does work. Like copper actually does kill bacteria, right? But some of her stuff is like, why do that? Why do that? What good would that do, right? But there's a symbolic reason for that, and I'm not an expert on any of this stuff by any means, but there's a logic to it, and symbolically it makes sense, even if maybe medicinally it doesn't probably work. But again, I'm not here to debunk things. I'm not here to say, oh, well, we know now medically that St. Hildegard's remedy for, gout doesn't work. I don't really care about that stuff. But yeah, that's pretty much it. There's a lot more to say, and I'm excited about this project. So, and it's kind of one of my first solo episodes I'm doing. So I'm, hopefully if you've tuned in this long, you've stuck around this long, then I hope you've enjoyed the video. And we'll have more to say. I'll have more to say about this stuff, and obviously I'm going to keep going with like the interviewing guests about whatever topic I'm interested in at the moment. But yeah, so I think in this video I'll try to find images to throw up here, and that's pretty much it. So make sure you subscribe to my podcast, and whenever I set up the YouTube channel, subscribe to that too. I do have one. I don't use it much, but I'm hoping to use it more. And then go to my Substack, read my stuff, subscribe. If you want to become a paid subscriber, you certainly can. You'll get access to these videos, the Bestiary videos, and other stuff too, potentially. And yeah, so tell your friends, go read Tim Powers and C.S. Lewis. All right. Thank you. Bye bye.